Hi everyone, Sean Hall here, CEO of human performance company Energix, for our second session in the wellbeing stream. Now, quick question for you just to get started. How much of what you've promised, and this could be you personally or your executive team, how much of what you've promised, whether that's to your shareholders or stakeholders, your board, your customers, how much of what you've promised them relies or assumes that your people have got the capacity to actually deliver that? Because what we know right now, and this was even before COVID happened, was that people have got diminished capacity. We know that burnout was at pandemic levels already. We've got pandemics of mental health issues around depression, anxiety, got pandemics even of presenteeism and disengagement. All of those are massive risks to your ability to deliver those promises. Now, I'm not going to overpromise right now, and so that I can mitigate all that risk in just 30 minutes. But I do want to give you some starting points for thinking about what are conversations that you can have to lift the capacity of your team and therefore mitigate the risks around delivery. And so what we're going to do right now is essentially translate and connect what I taught to you in the first session into a team context. Because ultimately it all starts with you as the leader first. So let's get into this. And the reason I'm going to talk about leadership especially is because we really do have a leadership moment going on right now. Whether consciously or not, your team are actively choosing right now, or your employees, if you're a greater organization, are choosing right now. Once we get to any form of normalcy, will they stay with you? Will they continue to follow you? Are you a person worthy of being followed? Because when it comes down to it, when we think about the risks that we've been managing in 2020, the reason they're going to make these decisions is it's going to come down to how you've chosen to mitigate those risks by essentially caring for the people that you are looking after. So we have an opportunity right now to think about that and think about, are we leaving our people better than we found them? Are we leaving our people better than they started at 2020? Because that is the opportunity that I want to talk about today. Now, what we have to focus on, though, as always, is what do people actually need? And what we've seen is there's really three things that people need right now. And the first thing is they need to know it's okay not to be okay, but they also need to understand why they feel off. And you'll remember that in the first session, we talked about that the reason that we all feel off is because our brains are working exactly the way they should. Because when we're confronted with uncertainty, our dopamine is killed off, right? And that's why we feel off. That's why we feel sad. Our mood's affected. And just knowing that why, like being given that permission to not feel okay to start with, to not feel our best, but then to be given the reason why is a sense of relief, right? People need to know that, right? It's okay to be human. And actually, if we can arm them with a little bit of education around actually what it means to be human, even better. The second thing people need is they need skills, right? We've never been through a pandemic before. And so what we're looking at are real micro skills that can be learned in the rhythms of our business that exist already, that allow people to sustain themselves, to create sustainable humans, right? By providing them skills that enable them to be confident, to feel positive, and to feel well, because that's going to have a big impact on their capacity to deliver. And the third thing is they need you. They need leaders who believe, and I hope that's why you're joining this session with me, is that leaders that believe you can leave your people better than you found them. Now, all of this, like with what's going on, I talked about dopamine before, right? Is the thing that we know is that we can get our dopamine flowing again. We do that by focusing on what we can control and then acting on those things. So what can we control? Well, I talked to you about these obviously in the personal context in the first session, But now, as I go through them, I want you just to reflect for a moment on what that means for you as a leader. So, what does it mean for a leader when you're taking responsibility for your own energy? Well, it's about role modeling, right? Because the most powerful leadership behavior is how you choose to lead yourself. What does it mean when you think about taking responsibility for your energy impact on others? Well, of course, this is what leaders do. Our shadow, the higher we get up in an organization, the bigger energy impact we have on that organization. And the third thing is being really good at what you do. Leadership in itself is a skill, right? It's something which is learned. It's a privilege. It's something which is earned, right? So taking responsibility for being the best leader that you can be. That's what I want to talk about here today. We're bringing that whole idea of your personal responsibility into leadership responsibility as well. Now, what I'd say here is, again, just as we did before, don't waste your energy on anything else. Focus on these three things you can control. And boiling it down, again, even simpler, is you can think from a leadership perspective. Am I an energy vampire? Am I making energy vampire decisions for myself and for my team? Right? Because that's ultimately what it comes down to. This is the leadership moment, and every choice, you get a choice to lead in a certain way. Are you going to lead? Are you going to make energy vampire decisions? Or are you going to choose to be the opposite? Now, before I get into what that means, I want to just focus on some data around what's going on. As I said, people's capacity is diminished. Now, we've assessed over 8,000 people. And one of the questions we asked people was just how many of the last 10 days they felt they had enough energy for what was important to them. And for women, this is only 48% of the time that they feel they have enough energy, with a goal to get to 80%. Now, this is what I mean by diminished capacity. If your gas or your batteries are only 48% charged, there's no way you're going to get to your destination. So we're going to think about that in the same way, but in a human way. And when it comes to men, it's not that much different, 51% versus 82%. So our job as leaders is about making the decisions that enable our people to get from where they're at that 48 or that 51% to the 80 or 82. And so when you think about that, taking responsibility, focusing on what you can control as a leader, right? It's really about thinking about this in a very holistic way as well. So, and this means that you can use data like we've got here. And I've just given you one data point here right now. We've got literally hundreds of thousands of them that enable you as a leader to make real decisions that are measurable and actually this promise of leaving your people better than you found them. And when I talk about that, I want to talk about four things. It's about leaving your people more mentally well. It's, of course, leaving them more productive, because right now, one of the things that's going to make your brand stand out, your team stand out, is actually by getting shit done. Pardon my French, right? So being more productive. And when I talk about more productive, I mean creating value, right? Focusing on the highest value activity, because that's what enables a team to thrive, is those teams that are able to create new sources of value, even in times of uncertainty and chaos. The third thing is linked to that, right? Being more innovative and creative in times like this as well. And then finally, be more inclusive and emotionally intelligent, as we know the economic benefits, the business benefits of that too. So when you're doing all these four things as a leader, what that means is you are, first of all, showing up and being a role model, right? The most powerful leadership behavior is how you choose to lead yourself. So start by implementing everything that we talked to you in the first session, right? To be a role model for that is so, so important here, because people are going to focus on how you act and behave, not what you say. And so if you've authentically experimented with what we've talked about in session one, you'll be so well placed to actually role model what we're about to do in this next session. Because this is ultimately what it's about. So we said to you before, we've got two choices, right? As a leader, you can choose to be an energy vampire to your team, which starts with being an energy vampire to yourself. Or you can choose to be an energist. You can choose to leave your people better than you found them, right? By making decisions which expand your energy first and then the energy of others, of your team. So let's get into some different ways that we could do that. Actually, just before I get into that, let's talk about stress. All right. Now, I want to talk about stress as, I guess, all in a way, a proxy for risk. right? When something gets stressful, there's probably an element of risk attached to it, whether that risk is perceived or just not even real, but just perceived, or whether it is a legitimate risk. So I want you to think about just as what is the opposite of stress? I'm just going to let that thought go on in your mind, because there's three types of stress that we're dealing with right now. The first type of stress that we deal with is conscious stress. So this is a stress that we're conscious of, we're aware of. So for me, I know that when I am carrying my stress, or I'm really, or I've been through like a time where like a big project or something that's important, it's almost like my shoulders creep up and they're almost up by my ears, and I need a massage to get them down. Right? I can feel it in my body. The second type of stress is unconscious stress. So this might happen, and you've probably seen this more in other people than you've perhaps noticed in yourself, where there might be an uncomfortable conversation going on. So people start twitching, right? Or they're clicking pens, or they're shaking their legs, or whatever it might be. Their breathing starts to get a bit more shallow, right? So they're not really aware of it, but you can see it, you can notice it, right? There's a vibe that changes, you can feel it. The third type of stress is subconscious stress. And this is almost like that pervasive feeling of unease, right? We can all relate to that right now. I know that when I first started to go through this, overnight, I guess dealing with COVID, I thought I'll be fine. I've been running a business from home for 5 years. I'll be sweet. As soon as I went to a supermarket and experienced that subconscious stress from people all around me, I was like, get me the hell out of here. I could just feel it, that anxiety. Nothing was spoken, but you could just feel it. So what's the opposite of those types of stress? Well, the answer comes from another Kiwi, a Kiwi biochemist this time, a woman called Dr. Libby Weaver. And so she studied the body's biochemical pathways around stress and the different ways in which stress manifests itself in our bodies. And what she says is the opposite of stress is trust. Right, just let it sink in again. Right, so often, and this is why it's so important around performance as well with a team. Right, we know psychological safety and trust is so important. It's like literally the foundation of high-performing teams. If you look at the research that Google did called Project Aristotle, we know this is so important. Psychological safety is also the foundation for inclusion, for belonging. Right, and it's because we feel safe to be ourselves. And so a way that you could think about this as a risk professional is if you have a group of employees that are transitioning back to work, you can role play or get them to think about, what do they need to trust? Who do they need to trust? Do they need to trust themselves? Very, very practical way to do this is simply map the journey from home to work and then at work. Each moment in that journey, each step in that journey, ask that, what do I need to trust? Who do I need to trust? Do I need to trust the public transport company's done a deep clean? Do I need to trust that my colleagues have been doing physical distancing? Do I need to trust that I can have some tools in my box, essentially, to manage a situation where I might feel anxious or overwhelmed? And so that I know that if that eventuates, I've got a way to deal with it. I can trust myself. Now, the most powerful way to build trust and the most powerful technology that we have is conversations. Right? It's not Zoom. The most powerful technology we have right now to build trust is conversations. So we're going to translate what we learned in session 1 into these trust-building conversations that also boost the energy of your team, right? Because when we have an absence of trust, there's a whole lot of depleting energy that comes along with that too. Okay, so day 1, what are we going to do? The first conversation we're going to have on day 1 to boost our team's energy is we're going to go back to chronotypes. So you remember that we talked about your chronotype based on sleep science. So the sleep science tells us the number one thing that impacts the quantity and quality of our sleep is regularity. So knowing your chronotype, what time you should go to bed, is really important. Are you a morning or a night person or something in between? So a way to boost that and bring that into the team context is to talk about this in the context of diversity. Because what you want to learn as adults, right, is understanding people's different chronotypes and what might be the best times to collaborate with each other. If you're a morning person and I'm a night person and I'm seeking to understand how you work best, that's an inclusion conversation. I'm valuing the difference in you and wanting to know more about you. And then what I truly believe is that the most human organizations going forward, and this is already how I structure my life, are going to base flexibility policies around chronotype, because this is our inbuilt rhythm. We can't change it. 9 to 5 is an imaginary construct, right? It's not how we're built. So this is a great way, it's a great conversation to check in with each other, right? And build trust and explore people's chronotypes. Day 2, we're going to have our water check-ins. Now, remember we taught you in the first session that our brains are 80 to 85% water. That means just a small amount of dehydration is impacting how we think and feel. And so this is a great way that we can look after each other and boost each other's energy. So you can experiment with herbal teas here, fresh herbal teas, fresh flavors, those types of things as a way to actually make sure you're getting enough water, right? But also to check in. So you might just assign one person each day as the water person who does the check-ins. Day 3, what are we going to do? Okay, well, on day 3, we focus on being a cheerleader to others, right? So in the first session, we talked about being a cheerleader to yourself, and this is about giving strengths-based feedback. So this is where we're exploring the power of positive psychology and focusing on strengths versus weaknesses to actually boost energy and to boost esteem, boost creativity, all of those positive benefits that come with strengths-based interventions that are well researched. And so a way that you might do this is that if you do, again, the free assessment that we've provided you to understand your strengths using a positive psychology tool, you can then explore as a team each other's strengths. What's the diversity of strengths that you have in the team? And a way that you could be a cheerleader is that when someone expresses a strength to you, and you go through, and you go first in this as a leader, is that you can use that as a way to reinforce that behavior or that strength that you've seen. So for instance, you might have, someone might say that or share that their strength is creativity. And so you might say, oh, actually, I've seen you remember that last meeting that we're into and you were presenting that amazing creative idea, the client loved it. And that felt great because I knew that it would something that we all believed in and we can get behind. Great way of giving strengths-based feedback and rewarding that behavior. Day 4, what we're going to do here is breathe. So remember we talked about square breathing as a way to calm your parasympathetic nervous system, right? To get out of your head and into your body. It's a great technique for dealing with overwhelm. It's a great technique for stress. And it's a great thing to just incorporate into your rhythm. So if you're bringing a group of people together for a meeting, that's going to be a very expensive event, yeah? So mitigating risk. How do we get the most out of that meeting? Well, we do that by getting people focused and present. So at the start, do the square breathing technique. Remember that was 4 in, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4, right? 90 seconds of breathing just to bring people into the room at the start is a great way that you can do this. And then take turns again to do that as well. It's also a great way to create a little bit of a pause as necessary in a meeting too. So for instance, you might have had a lot of sharing going on and then you just want to pause for a second to allow all of that to percolate with people and come up with an idea or approaches or solve a problem. Again, use square breathing as a simple way to get people chilled again. All right, it's just 90 seconds, as I said. Day 5, conversation we're going to have on day 5 is creating those team calm plans. Now, as I said before, we all know that our dopamine's been affected by uncertainty. Our calm plan, as we went through in session 1, is designed to give you a boost of happy hormones, your happy hormones. So your 4 happy hormones, which are dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. The way we did that was by creating our calm plan, right? So remember, calm was connect. Who are you going to connect with in a meaningful way? A was for act, well, active self-care, and we focused on nutrition. We're going to talk about that again in a sec. Because nutrition, right, our gut health, 90% of our serotonin, one of our happy hormones, is made in our gut. We talked about laughing, like finding and putting laughter into your day with intention, because we know that gives us a boost of endorphins, and same with movement, incorporating movement into our day to get endorphins as well. So this only takes a couple of minutes. So it's a great way to check in with each other and just say, hey, let's do a calm plan. Everyone do a calm plan. You'll get great ideas because you'll hear other people's calm plans as well. And then just check in at the end of the day and see how that went for each other. All right, day 6. What was this? Well, again, we're coming back to positive psychology. So here it's about having a happiness stand up. So we talked in session 1 about the 5 happiness character strengths that we identified through positive psychology. Do you remember what they were? All right, so remember zest and enthusiasm, hope and optimism, gratitude, love, and curiosity. So you could do a little happiness stand up at the start of the day where you think about, okay, what do we need to do today? Okay, well, how are we going to what are we enthusiastic about? What are we most enthusiastic about today? Right? What are we most hopeful or optimistic about? What's the outcome we want to achieve? How can we give each other a bit of self-love, right? Or a bit of love and pump each other up? How can we be grateful? And we might even put this into the future. What are you going to be grateful for at the end of the day, right? Make that as a goal. And then finally, what are you going to be curious about? A great way, again, just to incorporate those simple positive psychology behaviors that are also shown to boost happiness into your day, right? So use that as a simple way to boost and have a conversation on day 6. Right, we're already up to day 7. Okay, so remember, in our calm plan, we talked about an active self-care around nutrition. And so what we want you to do on day 7 is connect over a veggie lunch, right? So trying to get maybe 2 or 3 servings of veggies, talk about having a little bit of a salad club, sharing recipes, whatever it might be, right? But focusing on getting that vegetable intake in that day. So you're connecting, right? And practice mindful eating. So a way that you could do this is that at the start of the meal, before you get into to inhaling the food, as we tend to normally do, right, is you might just do a little practice where you focus on the sensory aspects of the food. So the colors, the smells, the taste, obviously, right? Does it crunch when you bite into it? So focusing on each of those sensory aspects just forces you to slow down a little bit, and I guarantee a couple of other things are going to happen. You're actually going to enjoy that food a little bit more. It's going to be more tasty, and you'll access the micronutrients as well. So it's just a 2-minute start at the end of the day, but be intentional around that. Day 8, what are we going to do? Well, the conversation on day 8 is about moving meetings, right? So everything that I've already taken you through here today does not require any more time. You're going to be doing those sorts of things anyway. It's just about being more conscious and mindful of incorporating them in. So nothing requires more time. It's just about integrating it into the things that you're already doing. So here's one to do. And if you're a leader, again, this is a great opportunity for you to role model this, where you're choosing a meeting, and one-on-ones are awesome for this, that you can do while you're moving. And when we talked about moving, remember we talked about squeezing as well and strengthening, right? Because the research shows us that the type of exercise most highly correlated to memory retention, reaction times, and reducing cognitive decline is actually strength-based exercise. So doing a few squats, as much as moving around the block, are things you might think about incorporating here, right? So choosing one meeting or conversation that day that you can do while you're moving. Simple. Day 9, bringing it back to the value that we want to create, right? So as I said, if you want to mitigate risks, one of the best ways to mitigate risk is to create new sources of value. So how do we do that? Well, we use positive psychology again by having a creative get-together, right? And really focusing on those creative superpowers that we talked about in session 1 that are most highly correlated to creative outcomes. So remember what they were. So number 1 behavior most highly correlated to creative outcomes is curiosity. So as a team, focusing on a problem that you're solving and how we're going to be curious. The second was being brave, right? So you might ask the team, what's an idea that you've wanted to share, but you've been just, a little bit scared to in a way, right? I wanted to say, like, it's out there, no judgment. We want to hear the craziest ideas that you've got right now, right? What have you got to lose, especially in times like this? The third creative strength, remember, was about seeking perspectives, right? So this is where we want to explore diversity. So looking at, have we actually found the most interesting version of the problem that we're trying to solve, right? Where might we go? Who are a group of people that look nothing like us, and do they have a version of the problem? How's their experience? What can we learn from that? The next creative strength that we talked about was about enthusiasm, right? So having some real open conversations about what is it that you're most enthusiastic about with the projects that you're working on at the moment. And is it that you're enthusiastic about the problem or the impact it might make, or even that you're just enthusiastic about the process because you love that sort of stuff, right? It's awesome. You want to have a bit of a mix of all of those things going on in your team as well. And then finally, the last thing that's so important in terms of this creative get together is actually using all those brains and all that data you've been collecting to apply your critical thinking and judgment to come up with a belief, an insight, a solution to the problem. And also because we don't operate usually completely by ourselves. And therefore, critical thinking is really important because if you need to get, again, mitigating risk, if you need to get another team on board, or if you need to explain the risk that needs to be mitigated or your idea for actually how to do that, you're going to need to explain your thought process to other parts of the business, most likely, or other individuals, other people that are either influencers or decision makers. And so it's good practice to do this as a team together. So already at day 10, and what we're going to do on day 10, of course, on day 10, we're going to celebrate your team wins, right? So a great thing that we can do in all of this is actually as a team, again, allocate someone to be responsible for each of these conversations, right? Share the load, but celebrate the wins, celebrate each of the things that you've done. Share your shimmies, as we like to say, right? The things that you're really grateful for, and set some goals around what to do next, right? Which of these conversations that we've shared already do you want to continue, or do you want to know more about or go deeper? As I said, you can just think of this as just an introduction to building capacity in your team and to mitigating those risks to the promises that you've put out there around capacity. So definitely do that and think about how you can create momentum. Now, everything we talked about today, coming back to that idea of neuroscience, well, not idea, the reality of neuroscience, is that we want to get our dopamine flowing again, right? This is so important to get our dopamine flowing, not just as individuals, but as a team, by focusing on what we can control and starting to act on those things. Today, I've given you 10 conversations, 10 simple conversations that link session 1 to the team context to boost your team's energy as well as your energy. At the end of the day, this is what you want to do. Think back as a leader and go, as a leader, am I choosing to be an energist in all that I do? Am I choosing to expand my own energy and then the energy of others? Am I choosing to leave my team better than I found them? Am I choosing to manage that risk of all those promises I've made by increasing the collective energy, the collective capacity and creativity in my team? And everything that I've taught you today is designed to start that. Thank you so much for spending some time with me again. I hope if you haven't already, please check out the first session, and also please check out the panel where we talk about the idea of including capacity or mental well-being on our risk registers as well when it comes to delivering our promises to the market. If you've got any questions about anything that I've been through here today, there's my details on screen right now. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love your feedback on what you thought about here today. And I'd love the opportunity to work together. So get in touch. Talk to you soon.